Welcome to the Confessions of a Recovering Landlord podcast, where we let you in on secrets commercial landlords would prefer you didn't know. Brought to you always by our friends at Riata Commercial Realty, where they exclusively represent users of office and warehouse properties. Landlords have representation. Do you? Okay, I'm excited about today's episode. We have a friend named Tim Slaughter with Caddo Reimagined, and it's a really interesting conversation. I think you're going to learn a lot about co-working.
Going to be a horror show, though. Mr. Slaughter's in town.
I don't think he had a selection in that name. Be nice. Okay. So as we teased in our intro, we've got a fascinating guest today. His name is Tim Slaughter, and he is the president of Caddo Office Reimagined. And I love your slogan, providing a place to work that's near your home, but not at home.
That's right.
I think that's very appropriate right now in this time and space.
Very much. Well, thanks for having me. Looking forward to our discussion. And I think if we've learned anything from our prospects and members over the last, 6 to 12 months coming out of COVID is everyone's ready to get into sort of a real work environment in an office again. And a lot of people have tried the home experiment, and it may work okay for a few, but the vast majority we talk to seem to like it kind of the old way, which is interesting.
Well, I'm going to miss my elastic. I got to tell you that right up front, but it's probably time to fit back into big girl clothes.
You mean I gotta wear pants?
Yeah, right.
If you go to one of Tim's places, yes.
Yeah, yes, please. Yes.
I actually interviewed a guy about, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, and he had on his suit, coat, and even a tie. And about halfway through the interview, I'm joking with him, and I said, "But come on, let's be real. You're not wearing pants." And he's like, "Oh, sure I am." I said, "Stand up." He had on shorts. He really had on shorts.
Oh,
it's
man.
A form of pants.
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, I first got to ask you.
Yeah.
Caddo is a dog.
Is a dog, yes.
You got to clear that up for us.
Yeah, was a dog. So Bob, you may have known a broker by the name of Chris Thevenet. I don't know if you remember him.
Not sure I do.
Yeah, he was a broker, and my partner Dustin Schilling worked with him. And when we were starting Caddo back in 2009 during a recession, we had lots of time for business planning, and part of that was going out to Caddo Lake. And this broker, Chris, had a dog, a 14-year-old yellow lab that would jump out of the boat and go chase alligators when he saw them. And so we just thought that any dog that was audacious enough to go jump out of a boat that was perfectly safe and go chase an alligator was worth naming a company after. And so that's what we did. So we're the underdogs.
I love that story. I didn't know that story. And we've done some business together in the past, because when you guys first started your company, you didn't look anything like you do now. So Tell us what it looked like at the beginning.
Well, what it looked like at the beginning was we were in a recession, and, we were all sort of gainfully unemployed. And that's what happens during recessions to real estate people, especially when in my case, I was on the development side of real estate. And when there's no financing available for new development does not occur. And so I was redundant, to say the least. So I was terminated from my job, and then my partners that we founded the company, Dustin and Justin, they were commission, and the commissions don't happen as frequently during a recession either. And so we just were we loved real estate. We were all in our early 30s. We had a lot of ambition, but not a balance sheet or any track record together. And we just said, hey, what can we buy that feels cheap, below replacement cost, and that we may be able to roll up our sleeves and get some return out of. And the first thing we landed on was Lakewood Towers in East Dallas. And it was owned by a large REIT it was an asset management nightmare, because there was 50 or 60 tenants in a 170,000 foot building. And this particular REIT, Lexington, was big on owning single tenant buildings, which from an asset management standpoint is far different than one building with 60 or 70 tenants. So that was rolling up our sleeves, and we bought it relatively cheap, but there was a lot of work to be done. It was only 63% leased. And so, during that recession, it was all about trophies and train wrecks. People wanted to buy the empty building, and they wanted to buy the Class A, beautiful new building. And we just started buying everything that was in between, the 50, 60, 70% leased 80s office building that hadn't been renovated yet, but well located. So that's what we did for the next 10 years, basically, was go find those.
Well, let's be honest, some of them weren't that well located.
Yeah. No, they're not.
Because we have a client or two in your former buildings.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's all comparative, Bob. It's
It
yeah.
is subjective.
Yeah, subjective. Yeah, we thought they would be a good location someday, but I think for us it's always about a good value. If you're the landlord of you buy a B- building and you make it a B+ or an A-,
Yeah.
you're not in a AA building, right? So what's the trade-off of location or amenities that I'm making to make this a home for my business? And we tried to offer a good value relative to the market on that, but you're right. I mean, there were some, you're probably referring to our stuff over by Stemmons, which
That's what I was thinking of.
we didn't make out as well on that one as some of the others in Uptown or near Lower Central. So
well, and even Lakewood. I mean, Lakewood Tower, we have a client in that building still, and we're trying to extend his lease right now. And the rental rates we're being quoted are insane. I never in a million years would have thought that number would have been coming out of that building.
I
It's
know.
amazing.
Yeah, it is. And we're, we condoed Lakewood Tower. So one of our co-working Caddo Office Reimagined spaces is actually in Lakewood Tower. So we sold off the office, traditional office piece of the building to the August family last year. And they continue to own that and operate it as a more traditional office. And then the other side, which is the old bank, the old Lakewood National Bank lobby, is now our Caddo Office Reimagined Lakewood. And so that's kind of our flagship of this new co-working product that we're in.
When you say August family, is that Tom August?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So he used to work at Prentice Properties when I was there back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yep. And so his sons are actually the most actively involved in it now, and they're probably early to mid 30s and ambitious, smart guys, and they're buying several assets right now, including Continental Gin, which is in Deep Ellum, and then there's some other acquisitions they're making. So they're building a portfolio, kind of East Dallas portfolio of office and a few other things right now.
So in your original life of being an entrepreneur, you were buying buildings with Dustin and Justin, and turning them around, selling them, making a profit. At the same time, there was a company called Yeager Office Suites coming down from Indiana, and they were building buildings from the ground up, where the entire building was a sort of co-working executive suite type operation.
That's right.
And you ended up buying them. So walk us through that. How did you guys end up pivoting from buildings where we had sort of quote traditional office tenants to, you talk about 50 to 70 tenants. Heck, you must have 500 or 700 tenants now.
Yeah, we're close to 1,000. We're close to 1,000 now, Bob, which is, it's a different game. I mean, you've got to standardize a lot of things, and you can't negotiate every lease. You can't do TI projects. So it's a different game entirely. But yeah, the Yeager family is fantastic entrepreneurs. These guys were basically a general contractor from Indianapolis who was building out gas stations for like Shell, so like, he'd go out and say, hey, I need a new gas station on this corner in Indianapolis or Chicago or whatever. And he'd go build them. And they were happy with the work that Scott Yeager was doing and his family. And so they wanted to come to town to meet him. And he was like, well, he was working out of his garage. He didn't want to tell him that. So he found a building and he staged it to look like it was a bigger office than he actually had, and had some of his buddies, furnished it and everything, built it out as office, had some of his buddies appear for the days that there were meetings, had a conference room and all that. And what came out of that was sort of the beginnings of a co-working operation. His buddies were like, "What kind of like what you've done here? Can we just lease this office?" And so it's really it was kind of necessity was the mother of invention, and they, to their credit, they saw that opportunity, they hit it, they built more of them. They not only converted some existing buildings, they started building them ground up in Indianapolis, and they built 8 of them in that market and have a very successful market there. They were, if not the first, among the first in co-working in that part of the country. And but they woke up, call it 10, 11 years ago, and Scott was like, "Hey, what other markets could I expand to?" And he's looking at the demographics and the growth of DFW, and just picked DFW and took his blueprints from the Indianapolis ones and just kind of advanced them forward, made them bigger, and built one in McKinney, and then built 3 others in Plano, Frisco, and Allen. And so he built 4 locations here, all from the ground up, and did a fantastic job of sort of building this prototype around ground up co-working. And so we were able to sort of stand on his shoulders instead of invent this concept from scratch. And we're pretty risk averse, and so buying a cash flow stream that someone has already created is a lot easier. And that's why we've never developed office buildings till now, because we've always taken a building that already had tenants in it, already had cash flow, and just made tweaks on it. And so this kind of fit who we were from a risk standpoint, was to take something and tweak that's already working. But now we've kind of stepped out, and we're starting to develop new locations and expand the concept. So it's a different game, but it is still serving the small business community that we love. I mean, the 1 to 10 person business, I mean, that's been our company's a little bit bigger now, but that's kind of been the size of our company for a long time. And so we really relate to a small business owner, because we are small business owners in this market. And so we always related better to that small tenant than we did to, a Fortune 500. We never were super enamored with the long transaction lead times and getting beat up, and getting the high TI and all that in the 10-year lease. And it just wasn't very much fun. It was more fun, negotiating with the person making the decision and learning about their business. And so it was kind of a natural.
Flesh that out just a bit more, talking about the 1 to 10
Yeah.
person type business.
Yeah.
What is their usage? I mean, what kind of people are attracted to this model?
Well, so we're embedded in the neighborhood, so we're trying to be, kind of in your bubble, 5 to 10 minute drive. So here we are, I'm sitting in our office in Lakewood, and a lot of people, they do their shopping at Whole Foods here and on Gaston. Their country club is Lakewood Country Club. Their meat casinas at Lakewood Shopping Center or Cock and Bull. And it's so convenient. They're 5 minutes from their house. And so, if you have a choice and you're a 1 to 10 person business and you don't have employees driving from all ends of the earth, and you want to pick your kids up from school, you want to be home for dinner at night. And so that's kind of our member base. Once your company starts getting very much larger, the consideration of your entire workforce has to sort of start to dominate. And some of our locations that are embedded in these neighborhoods might not be the most highway accessible all the time, which, when you're thinking about, a bigger operation that might want to be in, Las Colinas or something like that, because you've got the nexus of all these highways. That's not us. We're not focused on that. We're focused on the convenience for the owners and the few employees of that small business in that neighborhood. And we don't want to be the enterprise. In fact, we've had hard conversations with several members, and I had one 2 weeks ago where it's like, you're getting too many suites now in our space. You need to start thinking about moving out. And that's a weird thing for a landlord, conversation to have.
But that's when you give us a call and say, "Bob, I need you to tenant rep this guy out of here." Right?
So yes, and that happens. But tenant reps are so aggressive that like these small businesses have so many calls from so many tenant reps. Even I'm sure in our buildings too. But but no, you're right. I mean, we've learned the hard way. We've had some small buildings. We owned a building at the old Bright building at Fitzhugh and 4228 North Central Expressway. It's about a 50,000 square foot building. We had a 7,000 foot tenant in there that just held us over the barrel on a lease renewal because 7,000 feet on 50,000 is material. It's a big deal. You didn't want to lose them. And so we learned that when you have smaller buildings, you can't afford to have someone taking up 10, 15, 20% of your building. And that's what we want to avoid. And this concept, I mean, we have these 40,000 foot buildings with 160 units in them. And, you know, we don't do credit or anything like that. There are no lease terms on them. There's no TI really. So it's like, come on, you know, get your deposit in, your first month's rent. But we're not gonna, you know, we're not gonna go long term on it. We're not gonna get exposed to a bunch of suites to one person, and that's different. But it's a shared working environment. So, you know, going into a common hallway to go between offices and stuff. Once you get beyond 5, 6, 7 suites, that starts to get awkward. And, you know, the small business wants to have their own brand and culture also, just like anyone else when they get to a certain size.
Well, you know, it's interesting what you're saying here, which is ultimately what I'm hearing you saying is go small, have higher diversification among your tenant base. And, you know, for the first 20 years of my career, I was representing landlords. And in my last 9 years, I was an asset manager. So I had a bunch of office buildings throughout Texas. I had 18 in DFW and also some in Phoenix and Northern Virginia at different times. And my observation was always the bigger the tenant is, the more power they have to drive the landlord down to their point of indifference.
Yes.
To where at the end of the negotiation, the landlord is basically in a position where they're like, I don't really care if you stay or if you go. I might actually be better off if you leave because at least I have some upside now. And so, in fact, you mentioned Stemmons earlier. We had a building on Stemmons Freeway just on the north side of Mockingbird. 3 tenants were the big tenants that occupied 90% of the building. They all expired in the same year. 2 left.
Oh,
2 left. I mean, that building, we bought it for like $53 a foot.
yeah.
You know, below replacement value you mentioned.
Yeah.
We sold it for $58 a square feet, so a foot. So we didn't make any money.
No. Sounds familiar.
I just read, sorry, that's bringing up painful
No.
memories, but I just read in the paper that same building just sold, and I'm forgetting the name of the entity that bought it. It's some sort of governmental entity, paid $61.75 a foot for it.
It's never changed.
20 years later, and it's still crap.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, it's I don't know. We have a lot of product here, and clearly, especially the smaller business. I mean, I always thought signing a 5-year lease, especially for your small business tenants, it's a crapshoot. You don't know where you're going to be in 6 months with your book of business and your pipeline if you're starting something new. And I always thought that was just really hard to match. You know, we tried to reach down when we were traditional landlords and build spec suites. And so we can kind of take that build out process out, and we could do maybe a 2 or a 3-year lease. And, you know, we didn't have to do any kind of customization to the space, and it was quick and easy. But even then that was hard. We'd have to run through, you know, a couple tenants before that paid off. Right. And so, I don't know. I feel like this mode of operating is better for the small business. And I think people learned through COVID, flexibility is pretty important. Like if you have 10 offices in a traditional office and you want to have 3 in 60 days, there's no real option for you. In ours, you give us 60 days notice, and several people did that during the pandemic. They go, you know, 5 to 2 or 1 or 0. And then, you know, but you know, that's something that we have to bake into our system, is like, how do we absorb that, you know? And that was our biggest fear coming into co-working, was like, well, there's no, this particular model, there's no term. You know, some of our competitors have terms and they're trying to get you on terms, but our founder, you know, the Yeager family, the business model we're operating under, just said, hey, just do 60 days. And he'd been operating that way for 15 years and been through several recessions. And we looked at his historical occupancy. That was our biggest question. And I don't think he ever got below 90%. And I think he went through 2 or 3 recessions. And then we went through COVID and we didn't get below 80%, which for, you know,
wow,
that's shocking.
It's shocking. So, you know, after the pandemic, honestly, we were kind of half foot into co-working, half foot into traditional. We had buildings in both. And after we saw that performance, we were just like, all right, all chips on co-working, because if it can hold up during that, I mean, it's resilient as all get out. And but the small businesses have always been, in my opinion, more resilient than the Fortune 500s. They'll go bankrupt. They'll do M&A activity. I mean, they'll change strategic, midstream through a 10-year deal and just, devastate your building. And you think you've got all this credit, but what do you really have with those big companies,
So one of the things that we've noticed throughout COVID is that and really more post-COVID, I should say, the whole work from home conversation that everybody's been having, what we've noticed among our own clients is the bigger the company is, the more likely they are to have a work from home policy that allows their employees to be at home permanently or several days a week, more so than the smaller companies. The smaller the company is, the more they're all back in the office if they ever stopped coming to the office.
Yep.
And so we're seeing that that's really a major thing. In fact, we represented a client who occupied probably 35-40% of the building here in Plano, giant international company. And, they renewed their lease for 5 years. And it was one of those things where, we were the guys driving the landlord to the point of indifference. And what was interesting though, is that after we got the deal done, they didn't decide to bring all their people back to the office. So now we're talking about subleasing it. And it's just, but those are the kind of decisions they were willing to make. But most of our small tenants either immediately went to the house and haven't come back, or they never quit going to the office and they're still in the office.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that, Bob, because some of the, most sought after companies that you hear, the Teslas or the Apples or the Googles, you see the struggle. I mean, they have some of the coolest office environments you can imagine. And look at the struggles they're having with getting people back and, trying to make this dance of like, I really can't afford to lose all these great developers, but I really need people back in the office. And it's an interesting little tug of war going on. And I don't know what the tipping point is, but it's there's certainly reams of press going about how do I get these people back in the office, And
Every other article is what must landlords do to attract their, not landlords, but employers to attract their employees back into the office.
And what is it? And all
Endless
we're saying,
snacks. Oh,
Well-
maybe that's just for me.
Isn't that what you're offering me?
yeah. And I mean, for us, it's just like, we want to, I mean, everyone's making a decision about their career now post-COVID. Like, okay, do I return to the office or do I want a different job now? Or do I want to start my own company? And so for us, that's kind of where we fit in, is like, hey, for those startups or new branches or whatever, we want to be there and be that kind of rich soil for entrepreneurial activity that we're kind of indifferent to the industry or the specific company. It's just be a good operator, keep it clean, keep the internet fast, keep fresh air, friendly face at the front desk, and then let the magic happen. It's all about our members, that they're the ones that make the magic happen.
So one of the things I'm interested in, you said that you guys never went below 80% during COVID, which
Right.
blows my mind.
Mhm.
And part of the problem with me is I'm too old. I've been through too many cycles,
You're
right?
just right.
Keep talking, baby.
Do I need to drop off here?
Podcast over.
Yeah.
So, I've been in the business 38 years, and my first 20 years was on the landlord side. My last 18 so far is on the tenant side. So I'm almost half and half. But back in the late 80s and 90s, every executive suite operator went under practically. And a lot of landlords suddenly end up being operators of executive suites that they never wanted. And then it happened again in the 2000 bust, tech bust of 2001 or so. And it happened to some extent, not as bad in 2008 and 9, but every cycle we've seen the quote flexible office market, which, was just executive suites, bail out and die. But in this cycle, it doesn't appear that has happened. But of course, this cycle is a little bit different in that, the businesses didn't die so much as just going to the office kind of went away for a lot of people. Why do you think it's different this time?
Well, I think, and I don't know. I mean, we started really in earnest being landlords in the business in 2010, but I think the breadth of the industry is probably a little different. Bob, than it was then, as just far as who the players are. I mean, Regis was around, has been around. IWG now, who also owns Spaces and Regis and several brands, but you've got these big public companies, and WeWork is now one of them. WeWork and Regis are the big ones, and they have, the lion's share of locations globally, and they're kind of the enterprise scale version of this. But you've got two other sort of players now in the industry. One is sort of just kind of your local coffee shop versus the Starbucks, right? Your White Rock. I mean, we're kind of like White Rock Coffee. We've got multiple locations, but we're all DFW, right? And we might be beloved in DFW, but no one's heard of us in Austin and San Antonio. And then you've got just, like the single site one coffee shop. I think there's one like Mudwater or something like that. I mean, there's just one little special neighborhood coffee shop, right? And so we have co-working operators that are typically the people working in the space own the space, right? And we're talking, probably less than 10,000 square feet, sometimes less than 5,000 square feet. So really small. Hard to make numbers work if you hire people, but if you're the owner in the space, you can do it. So now you've got kind of this breadth of options. And I think the innovation that comes with that, I think, there's so many membership options out there for people from one day office at a time, one desk furnished, a reserved desk and an open space, just a co-working membership that's month to month, a co-working day pass, a virtual membership that you don't even ever physically show up to the space, but you use mail and maybe reception services. So I just think the industry has, there's just more energy around it. I think WeWork opened up people's minds to, Regis kind of had this everyone kind of saw it as like dowdy old office space, like it'd be kind of the B- space for office, and they'd repurpose some office that somebody else had moved out of, and it looked like it, right? The ceiling tiles were the same ceiling tiles from the previous tenant, things like that. And I think that WeWork kind of brought some coolness and cachet to it. And then just the ability to work in the cloud and remotely. None of us needed to, we didn't have to be plugged into a network to work. We could be on a Wi-Fi network. And so I think that really opened up things for us. But I don't know if that helps, but I think the industry it's a broader industry now. I think WeWork did a lot for it. I think the small entrepreneurs doing a lot to, expose people to the opportunities out there. So
do you have a definitional difference between co-working and executive suites?
No, I mean, that's one of the problems with the industry is what do you call our industry? And I think we've landed on co-working. But to me, I always kind of thought of co-working as I'm in an open office environment, or like in a Starbucks lobby, someone's sitting right next to me. I'm trying to talk over them. But it seems like that's where we've landed. Co-working means kind of shared office, right? We're sharing conference room, kitchen, hallways, bathrooms, and we're working together at different companies in the same space. And that's kind of how I see the co-working. Executive suite, really, does it mean anything different? I don't think so. If you take that definition that it's got all that same stuff. It's just, I think it's probably a decade or two older description. And
yeah, I had a membership to Regis. They gave me this card, which allowed me to go to I'm trying to remember what they called it, but it was basically their co-working open hot desk kind of option where I could walk in, say, hey, I need to, work here for a couple hours. And invariably it was like a desk or a table shoved into a corner in the kitchen. And I'd be sitting there working on my computer between meetings, and everybody's coming and going, getting their coffee. And they're like, hey, they don't have a clue who I am, but they're like, who's this dude sitting in the kitchen? And so I did that for a long time. And then we got a membership to a co-working place, which we did Common Desk. We really like Common Desk. That's one of our favorite ones, mainly because they have the number of locations they have throughout the Metroplex. The way they've built them out and all. WeWork, I was never as big a fan of. I called it people in aquariums because they always had those people in the glass boxes. And
but Common Desk is WeWork now.
it is now.
Yeah.
I was very sad when that happened. Although Nick tells me
Happy
he's
for
going to
Nick. Yeah.
Yeah.
be operating it as an independent thing. So hopefully that'll stay the case. But anyway, it's way better now going to that than it was to go into Regis, simply because now it's I have a lot more options. I can go in my little phone booth and have a private conversation. I mean, I can reserve a conference room, whereas on the Regis thing, I got that little desk. That was it. If I wanted a conference room, I had to pay for it. If I wanted an independent private office, I had to pay for it. So it's a different animal. And so I think the thing that's good about all this that you're saying is there's so many different options that it really will fit anybody.
Well, it will. And so given that it's a crowded space. And so how do we set ourselves apart as a brand and in the minds of the customer? And, for us, this, our location is one of them. The other is we're into the private, our product really is the private office, 4 walls and a door. And that really fits with our typical suburban location is, people are going to looks like you guys are working out of home offices or offices that have a door that's shut. There's nobody interrupting you. There's no dog or child or anything like that. And I think a lot of our folks value that, that ability to focus because they do have a family at home and they want to get their stuff done and they want to get home for dinner. And so, I don't necessarily want to have a gab fest in the coffee. I mean, I want some weak social ties with people. I want to say hello, but I'm not there to meet my future spouse or business partner. I'm just trying to get my chunk of work done or, my project or whatever. And that's what we kind of find with our customer that might be a little different than some others, but.
Cool. Dan, what questions do you still have?
The only one I had was I really liked your mission and motto statement of over the next 5 years, we aim to build the most successful neighborhood office brand in Texas.
Yeah.
You've told us a lot of tenets about how to get there, but what will that look like for you?
Yeah. Well, we admire, some strong Texas brands that we're studying right now are, Southwest Airlines and Whataburger.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you what that research looks like.
Yeah, I actually bought a book on Whataburger and I'm learning the whole history of Whataburger right now. But what are those? They're beloved Texas brands that became very strong in Texas before they ventured anywhere else. And I think that we're such a deep market. DFW is so dynamic, so many people moving here that it's like the opportunity is really large here in our own backyard. So we really, I mean, if we can figure out Texas, then we've got a really strong base to work from to grow beyond. But we're not, we're buying land and building buildings. You don't do that overnight. If you're WeWork, you can lease in an office building and have a new space open in 90 days. We can have one open in a year if the land doesn't require much horizontal development. So it's it's a little bit more organic, and it's a little slower, but that kind of fits who we are and helps us to adapt our prototype to this market. And I don't know, I think it all boils down to listening to our members, and our members are small business owners. And if we have our finger on the pulse of what they want, and we adapt the prototype to what they want, we don't have to worry about the competitive universe and what else is going on out here, who's going public or any of that stuff. We're just
Dr. Pepper on tap.
And Shiner.
Well, I'm 9 to 5. Bob's obviously 5 to 9.
So I'm interested in your, you have a new location about to be opened in Plano.
Yes.
It'll be your second Plano location. So this will be the one on the south near the Bush Turnpike, as opposed to the one north close to 121. When does that open?
November 1st.
Oh, that's coming right up.
Coming right up. So it looks mostly done, Bob. And if you want to go, just let me know. But it's the things with supply chain, you never know what's going to snag you. And that particular project, 2 things. One, Encore, connecting the power, believe it or not. Ask around with your development buddies. You'll find there's lots of stories about Encore. And then 2, doors. We have 160 doors that we need to get a CO. And guess what? We can't get
Hey.
doors quick enough.
You don't need doors. Come on, Tim. You're a co-working place. You don't need doors. When you get the doors, then you can,
Yeah.
become Cato Office Reimagined.
We can do those shower, curtain thing, with the tension rod.
Then I don't have to wear my big girl pants, right? If there's a shower curtain, I'm back to
That would-
elastic.
Yeah.
That would be hilarious.
So yeah,
Now, if
it
it-
opens, and the cool thing, we're trying something new. As an asset manager, Bob, that downtime is a killer. If you don't lease that office, the time it sits there, that day passes and it's unleased forever for that
Right.
day. And so we're doing kind of a founder special that we're trying there. So we're going to do 20% off the first full year of rent for the first 40 suites we lease. So that's about a fourth of the building. We're just going to do at 20% off. And that's just to kind of get that critical mass, because co-working spaces, if they're empty, they feel it. I know this sounds pretty basic, but if they're empty, they feel empty. And so you need a little bit of energy in your building. So we're actually going to bring our corporate office. We're going to take the first 10 offices there ourselves. And then, we're going to try to surround ourselves quickly with those founders. And so that's kind of what we're after. So we're spending a lot of time at the chambers and, trying to do our micro marketing with, Pierce and Richardson high schools are right there, and All Saints Catholics right there. I mean, we're working our micro targeted small business network as best we can. And
So
that's what we're after.
how many have you already pre-leased? or
We
do you not
haven't
do
even
that?
started. No, because
Okay.
what we've learned on our first two lease ups, Lakewood was our first one, Flower Mound was our second, sort of from zero to stabilization, is you only really get one chance to bring someone through. And the tour, you don't want to do it too early. I mean, it's cool to get a hard hat on and go look around, but most people can't picture what it's going to eventually look like with color on the walls and art and furniture. And so I think we're learning some restraint on pre-leasing and get it much closer to actual finished form before we start taking people through. We've got a few that are going to do it anyway because they're really eager, and we'll take them through. But by and large, we want to reserve the tours for when we're ready to. Okay, if you like this one, you can sign a lease today. It's ready to go. So.
What sizes
the
are
way
your?
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Jan.
With the way our podcast is going viral, you are going to get people knocking on your door just from listening to us.
In
And
2026.
I'm only going to take a 40% commission. So it's a great deal, folks. Line up.
Co-working,
let's go.
No, so yeah, Bob, we've got one person suites, 2-person suites, and then kind of team suites. And so the 1-persons are typically, between 80 and 90 square feet. The 2-persons are 11 by 12 is kind of our standard. So 132. And then our teams go from about 180 to 300 square feet. And that's as big as we go. And so anything bigger, people just buy. Yeah. And that's usable. That's not rentable. So we don't, so it's, it's not real apples to apples. We have huge, conference rooms and bathroom multi-tenant factor, but we don't go through, we just say, hey, 11 by 12, it costs you, $800 a month, and it's a gross lease. And so every year we have the opportunity to keep the rent the same or lower it or raise it. And that's it. But there's no term. You leave with 60 days notice at any time. So it keeps us honest. It's like, if we're not doing something right, our members can vote with their feet and be like, hey, we're out. And reciprocally, someone's, a bad fit for the community, we can say, hey, sorry, you're a bit disruptive. We've got 159 other members here. We got to consider, I think you need to find another spot for your business. And that's tough, but we do have those conversations, and you got to do that if you're in a shared community. Sometimes.
Yeah. So if you have an office of 1 or 2 or 3 people or whatever it is, how does the conference room time work? Is that just included? Do they have a limitation on the amount, or how does that?
They do. And this is part of the Jaeger formula, which is really smart. But basically, we just give 20 credits to everyone that has an office per month. And those are included in that base rent. So there's no extra charge. And I would say 98% of our people, that's enough for a month, because 1 credit is an hour in a small conference room. And then 2 credits is in the large, like 30-person conference room. So most people don't use more than that. And if you do, it's only $10 an hour overage. So we're really trying to keep it, Bob, the model of, charging nickel and dime for every little thing. That's antithetical to who we want to be. Okay, the entrepreneur's got it in their head. Okay, my rent's $850 or $1,000 a month, and that's all I pay. I mean, unless something unusual happens, but I can budget off of that, or it's like an apartment rent or whatever. It's just like, okay, there it is. Utilities included, all that good stuff. So,
when we were looking for a place for us to buy our co-working membership, we looked at a few different ones. Unfortunately, Caddo didn't have a location where we wanted it to be. So sorry, we didn't get to come see you guys. Although we have toured your other locations in the past. But anyway, we went through another to be unnamed provider.
Yeah.
And we walked through the place. First of all, nobody greeted us when we walked in the door. They weren't at the front desk. We had to wait for them. The place was a ghost town.
Yeah.
When we finally got somebody to give us a tour, they showed us around very sort of quickly. And we were asking questions like, right, what's included, what's not included, whatever. Anyway, they told us that you had to swipe a credit card to get coffee out of the coffee machine.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, wait a minute. So you're telling me if I'm in a conference room and I have like 5 people and a 6th person comes late and they want coffee, I have to stop the meeting, go swipe my card to get them coffee. Yes. Yeah. And every single hour was an extra charge for the conference room. We're like, we're out of here. No way.
We didn't even need to ask that. We walked in, we felt the vibe. It was over from the
get. Yeah, it really was.
And it's interesting because in our business, there's a tendency, I think, to want to separate the customer service on site, property management from the sales. And we have one person that does both.
Yeah.
And most people in our industry, they sort of tend to have a separate sales group that may or may not be on site if you just drop in. So you might have gotten the property manager and not the salesperson. And that happens because, we shop our competition and we see that and we're just like, well, our person, you got to find the right person because they've got to be able to tell someone no that's breaking the rules, but also sell them a new suite when they come in. And so that's tough. I mean, that's hard to embody. You've got people who are go sales. Yes, let's do this. And then you've got kind of the rural property manager. And we're trying to find this sort of balanced person who's like, hey, they're the face of the building and kind of, this is their ship and what they say goes. And if they told you that they could do that on the sales pitch, guess what? They're going to be the same person sitting here next Tuesday when you ask about that coffee. Yeah. And they have to do what they say, And so I think that's a good model, but we'll see. I mean, so far so good, but it empowers that person at the desk. They're not a receptionist and they're not just a sale. They are running the building, and so that's refreshing.
So what have we not asked about or talked about that we should have?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm curious to know what you're seeing. I mean, you talked about recessions and how things hold up. I mean, what are you seeing in the traditional office world, and what are you seeing with small tenants, and how are your clients seeing the world of office space right now, the smaller business?
Yeah, I think the key word is traditional.
Yeah.
There isn't any anymore.
Oh.
Yeah, we're spending a lot of time with clients helping them try to figure out what they should look like and what they're going to be, because they're struggling. Even small businesses, the owners are like, I want everybody back to the office, and for the most part they are, I would say. Yeah. For those that have kept an office, excuse me, if they've kept an office, most people are in the office. If they decided they weren't going to do an office, they're gone. Then they just gave up their office. They put it on the sublease market. They didn't renew it, whatever.
Yeah.
But we are seeing some clients, like I had a meeting yesterday with a company. It's a nonprofit organization, and they've got like 8 or 10,000 square feet. And so they're probably going to be shrinking down to maybe half that, maybe less. Yep. And a big part of the reason is because they're saying they're going to have only they're going to have 15 offices, and I said, wait a minute, you're going to have 15. How many people are you going to have? And they said 15. I said, wait a minute, you're going to give everybody a private office? That's unusual to hear these days. And they said, yeah, it is. And I said, how often are they going to be in the office? And they said, 2 to 3 days every other week.
Oh, God.
And I said, okay, so then you're going to have like 6 offices, 7 offices, 8 offices, and let people double up, where they alternate use of it.
Right.
No, they're all going to be there at the same time. Like, okay, I'm really confused. This is not what I'm used to hearing. So I guess that's what, Jan's saying is the word traditional is the question mark. That's a giant question mark, because what is traditional anymore? I don't know, because it's not looking like it used to.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting because I think, at least I'm seeing some chatter about, especially people younger in their careers, what are they missing out on of not being face to face with people in the office, and then just, mental health of, studies showing that even just, saying hi to someone getting your coffee or on the way to the elevator is important to your mental well-being. And so if we extract that, what does that do? But not that the office is the only place to get that, but then also,
mentorship is the big question. We've got a new guy coming in soon, joining our company, and he's very young, just out of college, and mentorship with him and training is going to be an interesting journey.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it all shakes out, but and then I'm sure technology will have. There's a lot of solutions out there that I'm sure you guys are seeing around, especially the big companies. Like, how do I enable sort of this hoteling concept of sharing offices? And, we have an app that we use for conference room reservations for all of our members, where you can book the app, book the conference room at any of our 7 locations on the app, which is really cool. But what if we could take that even a step further and do, like, even your suite access could be through that app as well, where it's like, hey, you just hired a new employee. Okay, our manager can turn on the access to their cell phone to open the door in the suite. And if they're no longer an employee, they can equally turn it off, or, heaven forbid, rent isn't paid, we can turn that off as well. So, but you gotta, look at, have you guys been to a hotel yet where you don't even check in at the front desk?
Yeah. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. In some cases, but like, I've been on a trip where it's like, I'm out of town for a few days and I never said hello to anybody checking into my hotel. And it's, 4 days, and you're just like, I just want to say hello and talk shop, ask about a place to eat. I don't know. Like,
you're a very lonely man.
Well, no, it's just, it's the little bit of extrovert, So.
You want to recommend a co-working for him?
I am the case study. I need people. So.
All right, Tim. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, enjoyed your company, guys, and thanks for the time. Appreciate you.
Appreciate hearing about your concept.
All right, we'll see you guys.
Bye.
Bye.